So I wanted to take a moment to welcome everybody to our second session of the Classroom Management Mastery Series for 2020. Just as kind of a quick reminder, this is part of a year-long series to where we will be actually offering a badging opportunity to participants who are able to attend and do a follow-up activity for at least 9 out of the 11 sessions during the year. So we appreciate those. Yeah, we're already at over 100 people. I'm really excited about the turnout that we had last time and this time. This is a fantastic turnout. So in order to be eligible for this badging opportunity, we do ask just for a quick survey for you to fill out at the end of the session, which we'll send out a link to here. I'll actually pop one in the chat right now while I'm thinking about it. And we do have just a little bit of a follow-up activity. Oh, Steph already put it in there. Thank you so much. We do have just a little bit of a follow-up activity that we're asking folks to do. It won't take too much time at all, but it's in relation to some of the things that we'll be going through today. So let's go ahead and get started. With this session, we specifically wanted to, and again, these are all based off of faculty input from the LMS satisfaction survey that we conducted at the end of 2019, which really helped to guide this work in knowing what faculty really wanted, more in-depth training on. And it was very timely because the gradebook was something that people wanted a little bit of a brush up on, and we had an update over break to the gradebook with a lot of really great improvements for our faculty. And then Speedgrader, which really ties in very closely with the gradebook. We wanted to dive into that as well, since we thought it was a nice partner with that piece, and it was something that faculty had also talked about wanting a little more training on. We're going to be talking about a tool that we're going to be rolling out actually tomorrow called New Analytics, which is really cool. The way I like to think about it is we talk about Inspire for Faculty, giving kind of a quick heat map of your students' engagement. But this really allows faculty to dive into some of the more minute details themselves and do a lot of analysis on their own in order to form their own thoughts. So it's a really cool tool. I'm really excited to be able to roll that out tomorrow, and it's very timely. Couldn't be more timely, since we have so many students that we see maybe dropping off in activity or participation in the class, and we just want to reach out. We want a quick way to be able to see have visibility to that, and this is going to help provide that. So I'm really excited to get that. Then we have a couple other, just quick updates that we want to provide, including an updated curriculum feedback form, which I'm really excited about, which is in production, has been in production for a little bit. So without further ado, I want to just go ahead and dive right in. What we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and just to give a little bit more of a specific agenda, we're going to go ahead and do an in-depth walkthrough through the Canvas gradebook. Walking through all the new features that rolled out and some of the old ones that, folks might not have been aware of. The interesting thing about, our situation too is our instance of Canvas is so specific to our curriculum model and things like that. So there's a lot of nuances, that go along with our instance of Canvas specifically. So I want to highlight some of those along the way. And then we'll do a live walkthrough through Speedgrader as well. And then we're actually going to have, so we have a special guest speaker this month, Dr. James Moore from Forbes School of Business and Technology. So while Steve's going to walk through, some of the functionality, the logistical how-to of some of these tools, Dr. Moore is going to go through some of the efficiencies that he uses, once you actually get to where the rubber hits the road, when you're writing your comments and creating that content to share with your students. He shares some really great, strategies for that with me earlier this week. And I'm excited for him to share those with you as well this evening. So I'm going to, like I had said, the LMS survey data had informed, a lot of this. And the interesting thing is that the, both Speedgrader and Gradebook aren't necessarily, honestly, they're very, they scored very high on faculty satisfaction rates. People seem to really like Speedgrader. It's one of the highest features that we actually had surveyed faculty on, which is great. And the Gradebook actually is a great improvement in a lot of ways. And especially this was actually taken before the update went out over break. So I'd be interested to see what changes there will be in that satisfaction rate next year with all the improvements that were made. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a gradebook that we have available through some of our accounts. And I do want to just double check in the chat and make sure that everybody can see the classroom that I have pulled up. When I see a message from Kimberly about the form not letting you open it up, you will have to be signed into, okay, great, thank you, into your faculty account through Microsoft Office 365 to access that. That's kind of how that form works with, works along with your faculty account, which is kind of handy. So the gradebook, like I said, this is a dummy account. We are able to kind of manipulate through this without looking at actual student data, which is very handy for us, here in our situation today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click through some things and kind of go through almost a top to bottom, left to right walkthrough of just about all the features that are available here, and especially some of the new ones. So up here in the top left, we start with the gradebook drop down to where, and this is a specific situation to where, with our instance of Canvas and the way that we use it, some of these tools just don't make a lot of sense for the way that our faculty specifically facilitate our classes. So for example, in the gradebook, we can go to individual view, and it takes us to a view that is just really not very conducive to most of the things that we do here. There are a couple features here that we could look at, but for most of our instance here, I'll go into some of these other features that are offered elsewhere, but this individual view really is not super helpful for us as faculty members in the Canvas instance that we work in. Another one that we can look at is called Gradebook History. Again, it's not super useful for us. We can actually see like when things were graded. It's more useful for when there are multiple teachers in a course, or maybe you have a TA in a course, at another university or something like that. But since it's all since we have one faculty member in a classroom, this view, not terribly exciting for us. Where things do start to get exciting with this last update in particular is really some of the customization that we're able to do as faculty members. I feel like if there was maybe for those of us who have been around long enough and can still remember the e-college days, their gradebook was actually a little bit better in a couple of different ways, because you were able to sort by week, and you're able to do just a little bit more customization. And with this last update, Canvas definitely made some of those options more available to us as well. So with this view tab here, we're able to arrange our assignment names specifically. We can arrange them by A to Z. It defaults to chronological, which makes the most sense for probably most of us most of the time. We can go by due date, which is essentially the way it's already set up. We can go by number of points, and then we can go by module first to last, which is also pretty much chronological. Now, here's where you might not have turned something on that they activated with this last update. Is you can see there's a couple of filters here with little check boxes, and they just disappeared and will reappear. And those offer us the ability to filter by assignment group and module. So modules are basically how we've grouped our weeks. So say I know that I'm working on grading week 4, I can pull up just week 4 assignments here. Or say I want to check quizzes, to make sure that I entered zeros for something, before the end of the class, I can pull up just quizzes. So there's really, between these two filters that are offered here, there's a lot of customization that's offered, to where you don't have, that's one of the things that we heard from faculty a lot is, scrolling all the way from left to right. That's a lot. It's a lot to take in. So these filters do offer a lot of customization along with, so those filters there. And then actually this filter up here is really nice too, because it offers us an ability to just pull up one student at a time if we'd like to. So maybe I want to see how Cole is doing, and it will bring just his student records up here, so I can just look at that. So it's a lot less, especially for classes with larger enrollments, it's definitely harder to take all that in sometimes. So if you're wanting to look at one student in particular, that's one way to approach that. One other thing I did want to highlight in this view dropdown is the notes. So the notes is basically a section of the gradebook that actually just disappeared when I unchecked that. But it's a little note section where you can keep record, a little bit of a note on your student that they actually can't see. So, you say, for example, and this is obviously our test account, you see a couple jokes in here, but You can put in there, it's nice for when students, a student has accommodations, for example. Maybe you want to take a note that a student is a military student or they're active duty or something like that. Or a preferred name even. It's a really nice way to just have that extra little space there that they can't necessarily see that. So you're not keeping sticky notes all over your desk. So unpublished assignments, that's one that really doesn't apply to us given our instance. For faculty that are like designing their own courses or have to build all of their own courses, that's something that they would use. But for our instance, not as useful. And the last thing I wanted to highlight in this little section up here is the actions piece, which allows you to import and export. Basically, it allows you to export the gradebook. And it's one that, so it is useful. And I mean, for my particular usage, I do like to export the gradebook just so I have a list of my students, because I keep a manual Excel sheet of whoever responded to on what week and things like that. So I keep track of that. But otherwise, the import export is not as applicable to us, because it largely works with like on-campus places where they would, just kind of have their gradebook online, take it out, insert everything manually, and then load it back up to where we have Waypoint, we have Speedgrader, and we have quizzes that are automatically done in there. It's not really a feature that, really makes as much sense for us. And then one little extra thing that we had added a long time ago, and I had actually forgotten about until just while I was looking through this, but we actually have a course grading breakdown. So if you click that little thing here, it was something that we had in the old e-college classroom that we wanted to bring over. So we brought that over as kind of a custom add-on actually to the gradebook, which I haven't clicked on in a while, and I forgot was there. So there is one icon here for keyboard shortcuts in the gradebook. And honestly, I do find that the keyboard shortcuts really useful for Speedgrader, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. But the keyboard shortcuts I haven't found as useful for the gradebook, and maybe it's just our instance again, but if folks are using those and do find them super useful and want to post about them in the chat, I would love to hear how people are using that, because it's not something I've been using as much, but the Speedgrader ones I have found a little bit more of use for. So there's another interesting feature that rolled out, and it existed in the previous instance, actually, but in a little bit of a different way. So when we click on this gear, there's a couple of things that if you've been poking around, you might have seen options on and wanted to know a little bit more about. So specifically for, here's a late policy automatic application. I don't really suggest this for our instance necessarily. And there's a couple of reasons. So here's one for automatically applying the grade for missing submissions. I wouldn't suggest that right now, and partially because of the way that we're still waiting on that waypoint late flag in the waypoint to be fixed when it is returned to the gradebook. I'll talk about that just a little bit more in depth here in a moment, but I wouldn't suggest the automatically applying the grade for missing submissions because of the way the due dates work with the written submissions in Waypoint right now. So it might be something in a few months or a couple of months, hopefully shorter than that, when we have that fix in place, we can look at again. But right now that automatic apply grade for missing submissions doesn't make sense to me yet. There's also an automatic late policy tool, which is really, when you at first glance, it seems great, but with the way that our late policies actually work, it kind of doesn't work that great. So for example, I mean, with our written assignment submission stuff, it would be a little bit screwy with the way Waypoint returns that right now. So I would also kind of suggest avoiding the auto late policy things at this point in time. Maybe in a few months we can check back in about those, but at this point, I think that would be something we could skip over for now. Something that I didn't really do a lot of research into until this week was actually the grade posting policy section, which I did a little bit more research and just kind of poking around with, and it's pretty cool. So a lot of faculty members, when they're grading, they like to have the grades muted so that the grades can't be actually seen by their students until they're completely done, which makes perfect sense. The automatic grade post policy that's in place, that's what people are defaulted to. It's just basically when you post a grade, students can see it, no further questions. But if you want to do the manually post grade option, it's kind of cool because it'll automatically mute every grade for the class. And what that does actually, so it makes it to where you have to basically post a grade for a student to see it. But it's something you have to be very, very aware of because it works in a very specific way to where even like quiz grades, if you don't make sure that those are posted, you have to push them like through constantly to make sure they're like revealed to the student. So if you do mute everything and are in your gradebook every day, it might be something that will work for you. But otherwise, like when you use that manually post grade policy, what you'll have to do is go into each week and there will be a little signifier there that says post grades actually. So you'll have to go in each week and manually post. So that's just something to be aware of. There, it is a cool feature especially if you're used to muting assignments and things like that. But you just have to be very aware. And you might hear students say like, hey, I can't see my assignment, it's locked or something like that. So just have to be very, very aware and on top of that piece of it. So. And before I go on too further, I did want to pop in the chat. I do see quite a bit of activity. So I want to make sure. I know we have some folks in there that are kind of helping. Oh, we're going to actually talk about posting final grades. I see something about kind of that was a pain. And it definitely was a little bit of a pain before this upgrade, but this upgrade makes posting final grades a snap. It's really cool. I'm excited to talk about that here in a little bit. Okay, I think we're kept up with a lot of. Okay. So let's see. We talked about the grade posting policy. So from here, there are a few more options that we can and customizations that we can kind of go through. So you can see a lot of times, and this is a thing that Canvas does quite a bit, is they offer these little 3 dotted areas where you can kind of open up more options and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. So this does give us a few different options of how we sort the student name. So we can go by name, which is the default. The SIS ID, integration ID, login ID, again, doesn't really make as much sense for our instance. We can go A to Z, Z to A. We can choose to display as first last, last first, which is kind of nice. Now the secondary info, this is another instance where our Canvas, specifically works a little bit differently than some other institutions. And I double checked in my faculty account. So where it says username or email, you might think we might be able to get to a student's email, but actually what we access there is student ID. So like if you're doing a grade change and you need a student ID, you can go quick to the secondary info here and then choose username or email and it'll bring that up for a student, which is nice. But otherwise, the other ones don't really make a lot of sense with the way that our instance is set up. And another thing that doesn't quite work, and I tested it with my class, I was hoping that it actually would work after this upgrade came out, but in active enrollments, we still don't have a great way of being able to track when students have been dropped. We can always see our active students, but having like a crossed out list of students who have dropped or at what point, we still don't have a great way to access this. And this part doesn't quite work with our instance for whatever reason. So that's something, again, that doesn't quite work with ours. But now another thing, we did highlight this last week, but I did want to just bring it to people's attention one more time because it is so important and so easy to do, is the message students who tool. So here again, we have 3 dots by each assignment in particular. We can sort by different ways. Curving grades, I don't necessarily recommend. Setting a default grade, again, I don't necessarily recommend. Hiding, that's kind of the manual way to do that manual posting of grades I was talking about. You can hide it and then unhide it manually instead of all at once. And then that just goes into that grade posting policy again. But the message students who is really, really a very, very valuable tool, especially in times like this when we're wanting to reach out more to students who are maybe falling behind. It's a super easy way to go into the gradebook, see any student who has not submitted a discussion, and then you can just quickly draft them a quick message saying, hey, just wanted to reach out, see how things are going. You can do students who have not submitted, students who scored less than on an assignment, But it's a really nice, quick, easy way to be able to access and reach out to some of those students. One thing that did change a little bit with the way that the gradebook worked is when we actually click on the cells and enter the grades. So when we see, we click there now, we actually have this little arrow to where those pop-out desk or like tray, I think is what they call it, comes up to where we have a couple more details on what is trying to, I apologize. So what it does is when you basically click on a cell and you do that little pop out, it brings up an area to where you can adjust the late status if it is late. We've actually seen that with those waypoint assignments. So I wanted to bring up super quick the waypoint. So currently when we have written assignments that are returned from waypoint to the gradebook, it marks those assignments as late in the gradebook because that's when Canvas feels that they have received the submission, essentially. We're working on a fix to make sure that when a student submits their assignment to Waypoint, it shows up that it's submitted in Canvas, but it's still not working 100%. So that's something that we just kind of have to keep in mind with, where we see late statuses and things like that. So just something to keep in mind with those in particular. One thing I did want to bring up was this late status and to where it was. So if we go to, I want to say it was, I know I missed it somewhere. Well, that's okay. I'll come back to it. But we are hoping to have that waypoint fix here in place. We were hoping to have it in place actually before this webinar and before we rolled a couple of these things out, but the Zovio side and we are still working to make sure that that gets resolved as soon as possible because we know we get a lot of student questions about that. So one other big difference that actually came up that we've heard a lot of faculty feedback about with this gradebook update was this little icon that we see here. So essentially what happens is when a student submits an assignment, a discussion specifically beyond the due date, and especially if a faculty member has entered a 0 there, what ends up happening is this little icon shows up instead of the 0 that you see. So it looks like Rebecca might not have submitted post your introduction and I put it in a 0. But now I can see that she has submitted, which is actually really handy. I mean, when you're able to see a little more quickly that students have submitted beyond the due date, it's easier to follow up with them. So, well, what I can do here is I can see, it's hard to see that 0 is still there. But essentially, if I go into Rebecca's profile, I can still see in the week 1 post your introduction area, we can see that the week 1 poster introduction does have a 0 actually posted for it. But it's just not as easily visible with that little icon. So it's really, really, handy to have that icon, but it is, for those of us that, want to make sure that our gradebook is clean and we have everything covered, it just looks a little bit different than we're used to. So something to keep in mind, and one of those things that we didn't really realize was going to happen until after it happened. So I did want to make sure that we covered that one because we have gotten a few questions about that in particular. So for the final, thing that I wanted to do today, and with the gradebook in particular, I wanted to just talk quickly through the final grade process because there's a couple steps here that we can take to make that a lot quicker and easier than it ever has been. So say we're at the end of a class and I want to, this one is already actually sorted a specific way. So I want to see if I can pull up just the final grade here. And I want to make sure I can. Actually, let me just refresh that totally. It's the pro and con of a live session is you get to see it in action, but sometimes that action takes just a little bit longer. Here we go. So we have this one here. Okay, and we have the total column over here. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have these filters turned on and we have this final grade sorted here for the end. And then if we go over to this total column, We can move that to the front. And then we have the final grade. Oh, we can even hide the notes. Let's hide the notes so that's even easier. So now they're right next to each other. Now, there's two different schools of thoughts with entering final grades, and that's numeric versus alpha. Either one works just fine with the way that we have things set up, but they look just a little bit different, and I'll talk about that here in a second. So the way that I like to insert final grades, and thank you for my teammates for being good sports and not caring about what their grades are in this class because it's just a test. I like to actually enter the number here, and then all I do is I push the enter button and it brings me down to the next one, and it automatically makes it the right letter grade. So I can also I'll put 94 because I would round that up. 90, we'll do 91. And it does that really, I mean, you can just go through, if you're good with your 10 key, I mean, you can do it in no time if you set it up the right way. But I do want to mention, so it looks just a little bit different sometimes. So if I want to enter, if you enter the letter instead, that's also completely fine. But it does look like, so like maybe they got a low B, but you entered a B, and then the numeric looks like a high B. That's totally okay because our systems all just rely on the letter grade. The numeric scores don't actually get pushed over to our student record systems. It's just the letter grade that does. So it looks a little weird if that's the way you want to do it, but it also works just fine. So both ways are totally fine. But with just like a few clicks, you can really rock through those final grades in no time at all. So that is what I wanted to share about the gradebook in particular. And I haven't been great about getting in the chat. Is there anything huge I'm missing? I know Steph and some other people are kind of on track with it, so.
A few people mentioned Civitas. How does messaging in the gradebook coincide with Civitas messaging?
Oh, yes, that's a great question. Okay, so the way that works is, so Civitas Inspire for Faculty works directly with your email. So it goes to a student's email from your email, and then you get copied on that with your email. And the way that the Message Students Who functionality works is it's totally Canvas inbox. So we can't copy an advisor on it, but it does show up in their inbox as a little one right along the side there. So that's the way that goes. And we would love for it to be able to just kind of blast to their email and everywhere else, but that Message Students Who is particularly for the Canvas inbox, and the IFF is email. So that's the main difference between the two. But some of the Canvas analytics stuff that we're going to talk about here in just a little while is actually along the same vein of IFF in a lot of ways, but adds some really cool new features that I'm excited to look at. So.
There was also requests to show where to find the student ID again, if you could do that real quick.
Oh yeah, sure, I can pull that up real quick again. Yeah, because it is like, it was kind of a hidden, not hidden totally, but so if we're up in the student name, where we have the 3 dots here, if we go to secondary info, and I want to say it's username or email, and it shows the email here, but in an actual classroom, it shows the student ID if you click user or email there. So that is one nice way to be able to do that. So I'm going to, mostly caught up in the chat. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do just a super quick, the walkthrough for Speedgrader is not going to be nearly as long, but I did want to just walk through a few main things because one of the main things that changed, and we thought that it was kind of a minor change, but it actually ended up being a main way that a lot of people were accessing Speedgrader is, along with that gradebook update that went in place, we lost one of our access points for Speedgrader. And the good news is there are still 3 really, really easy ways that faculty can go in there. I'm going to click through these and then I'm going to go in and do a live demo of Speedgrader quick. But the first access point, which is the quickest and easiest and my favorite, is right there on the home page. If you see that to-do list that's over on your right side of the screen, if you click on that for your discussion forums, it'll bring you right into Speedgrader for that week. So if I know that's what I'm going in to do, that's my quickest way in. That's the way I like to take if that's the first place I'm going to. The second place, maybe you're in your discussion already, but if you're in the actual discussion area for your classroom, you can click those 3 dots up in the corner. You can drop down to Speedgrader and it will open Speedgrader for the assignment there. And then number 3 from the gradebook, there used to be a drop down up at the very, very top of each assignment to where we could get to Speedgrader, and a lot of people were going in that way. But now what we can do is, you know how I clicked on the cell earlier and you click that little arrow and there's this pop-out tray that comes up. There's a Speedgrader access right in there. So it's just a couple more clicks away in the gradebook, still accessible, but just a little bit of a different way to get there. So there's 3 easy ways to get there. Just kind of depends on where you are in the classroom at that time and what the quickest route is to get there. So since I am here, I'm going to go ahead and pull up, let's say, I know I'm going to be grading a discussion from week 1. So I see a week 1 discussion here. And what I'll do is I'll open that up. I'll go to Speedgrader. And Steph, I'm going to pick on you because this was the one that I saw text in the dummy classroom. So, oh, sorry, not sorry. And you'll see one of the things that I naturally do, and I didn't even think about it when I got in here. But one of the things that I do is, like, there are a couple tweaks that we can make that make it just a little bit easier to look at and function in. I'll get to those in just a second, but my muscle reflex was already kicked in. I was already adjusting my rubric and I was going to do a little zoom, but the first thing, I will go and start top to bottom, left to right, like we did for the other one. This brings you right back to the gradebook, which is really, really handy. The one issue that does kind of come up with that is, like, it takes you all the way out. So if you are used to it, and if you haven't done this yet, start now. Open link in new tab. So if you have your Speedgrader open and you want to check something else in the gradebook while that's open, you don't have to start all over. You can have the gradebook open in another tab, which is really nice. The second one is that process we were talking about with hiding the grades and posting the grades. That's just the way to manually do that within Speedgrader. It's another way to do that same feature. There's a couple options here which are kind of cool, I thought. I hadn't really dove into those as much. You can sort by the date that they were submitted if you wanted to, which is kind of cool. You can also hide the students' names in Speedgrader if you want to make sure that you're really, really being unbiased. I thought that was cool. I haven't looked at that yet, but I might give it a shot here in my next round of grading. Now, one of the things that I do really, really use quite a bit in Speedgrader is the keyboard shortcuts. And those are in the gear there up as well. The 2 that I use are J and K specifically. That basically scrolls from student to student. And you go basically forward and backward, essentially. And then I don't use the C and the G and R one as much. You can, like, hop into the comment part. You can go into the grade section, which actually, since we auto-populate the grades, is not as necessary. And then the R actually pops open the rubric. But these 2, the J and the K, are the ones that I really, really use quite a bit. Because when you're not clicked in anything and you just want to hit one button, you're able to just scroll from student to student super, super quickly. So, now, when I was talking earlier about, like, just the way that I like to adjust, there's a little bit, and some of the feedback that we get from faculty that I've seen in our surveys is that it's just a little bulky sometimes. So something that I like to do is adjust this. I like to zoom, adjust the zoom within my browser. And then another thing that you can do is, actually, if you click this once, it actually disappears to the side, which is pretty cool. And when we get down, looks like we've already completed our rubric for this one. We'll save it. When we get down here, we have just basic general comments, and then we can quickly insert a media comment. We can insert audio or video, or then we can attach a file. And some of the other feedback that we got from faculty is, they really want to be able to format this, the feedback that we leave here. And the Canvas leaves this very basic for a very, very specific reason, and it's accessibility, essentially. You'll notice this and the inbox really don't offer formatting for text, and it's really to make sure that these messages are as accessible as possible to students. It's kind of their philosophy on that. So it's nothing that we're holding back. It's a very specific choice on their part. And that's the high and low of Waypoint that I wanted to share today. So, we talked about all the things that we look through all the things that you can click and all the things that you can do, but, like, where the rubber hits the road is this assignment comments, right? There's just 100 different ways to slice and dice, the approach to this and how you approach your feedback to students. And I was lucky enough to have a conversation with Dr. James Moore earlier this week about how he approaches some of those efficiency pieces, in his own teaching. And he's here to share some of those with you today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to him here for a little bit. Thanks so much again for joining us today, Dr. Moore. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me, Cole. I appreciate it. And you covered so much in the Gradebook. There are 2 or 3 things I picked up on I'd never seen before. The J and K, I'd never used that. So thank you for sharing those tools. So if anything that I mentioned is redundant on top of what Cole said, please forgive me. But he and I use some of the same things. Of course, his experience is way more in depth than mine. But my specialty is getting through the post rather quickly, at least what I believe to be quickly. And I use a tool called Phrase Express. And the long and short of it is that it is a text expander. So I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop, and I will show you what I have going on with that. All right, so as Cole mentioned, you can actually get through Speedgrader through the buttons here, and that's generally the way that I get through. And forgive me, folks, if I'm not staring directly at you. I have a second screen that I'm looking at, so I see everything on the screen, but I'm not staring into the camera. Apologies. Okay, so what happens is when you actually click on one of the students' names and you go into your Speedgrader, a lot of times, I'm going to minimize this here. We have a lot of comments that we actually add for the students, and it takes a moment. I remember when I first started, before I started developing some of these techniques, I had a document that I would cut and paste, and I would go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I will put the Speedgrader link in the chat, but what I wanted to share is that when you're actually responding to your students and you've reviewed their posts, rather than taking a lot of time finding a cut and paste, utilizing the text expander Phrase Express is great. So in this instance, say I had actually graded I've already reviewed apologies, Jerry, can't see I got my screen blocked out. All right, for Miss Adams here. So I've already reviewed her work, and I've gone through the rubric. Remember to mute your gradebooks. I learned the hard way. The students, if you make a mistake, they see the changes, so you want to definitely turn those off. But let's say she got distinguished. I have Phrase Express as a code, and instead of me typing everything out or cutting and pasting, I have a code that I utilize that drops it right in. So I may have to adjust a little bit or tailor, but I can very quickly add in comments. I have comments pre-programmed, and Phrase Express is extremely easy to use. That, say for instance, the student didn't make the requisite post, I can actually put in the comments for that as well and throw their name in, and it's that quick. It saves so much time, and I saw a couple of questions pop up in the chat. Okay, so you would like to see the responses to the students. Okay, how do I do that, and where do I find Phrase Express? Okay, Phrase Express is here. Take a couple moments, check out the video. I've used text expanders in the past, and the vast majority of the ones that I used the first time around, only did text. The cool thing about Phrase Express is it actually does HTML, so you can put things in with colors and different things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a Word document just to share with you. This will be a blast from the past. I don't know how many of you remember this. Apologies. I have a different code. Sorry, that's the other thing. You have to memorize your codes or make them so that you memorize them. But it actually would drop in. This is the old rubric we used to use back in the day. And I used to drop that in so that I could, I have one for each set of points. So you'd have to kind of memorize those. But I brought the Word document up to show you a couple of other things. When you use the text expander, you can have a lot of things that you actually utilize. So you can pre-program those, and I use the heck out of this thing in Waypoint. I have it set up for my assignments in each of the Business 600 classes or whatever that you're teaching. So for instance, if I have a comment already pre-programmed, so I don't have to go and cut and paste and find all that information. I just pop in the code and it comes up. And to actually program Phrase Express is relatively easy. You are going to have your own little, I guess you would call it a book of sorts. It's your database, and all of your comments are there. And what Phrase Express requires is simply some sort of a code to kick it off. So I use 2 hashtags to key into Phrase Express what I'm doing. You can use 11, ZZ, Z1, anything you choose. I chose those because I know those are 2 things I don't normally type a lot of. And, oh, to mute the gradebook, Cole, if you don't mind me taking that, I will definitely take that. When you go to the gradebook, just taking a moment here. Okay, so I actually did this before I started toying around in here because I didn't want the students to see what we were doing. Okay, if you click on the 3 dots, and then you have your intergrade, or your grade posting policy rather, what you're going to do is then select manual and then click save. Now the key to it is to remember that when you come out of that, you actually have to come back to post grades. If you don't, you will enter the grades and they won't be posted. So just kind of a little piece there. The other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on is Phrase Express works exceptionally well in Waypoint. So as I showed you with the comment earlier, you can just drop all the comments in. You saw that I have a humongous database of comments. I've been building them for years. You can always come back in and edit them. And the other really cool thing is if you have a phrase that you use on a regular basis, like I have a phrase that I use for my students for the first discussion and a separate one for the second discussion, you can come right here and actually adjust those, tweak them on the fly, and then go back in and continue to post. So for instance, for discussions, the second discussion, this is the base or the template that I utilize. So if I want to go in and edit that, Phrase Express is pretty cool. It remembers the last thing that you edited or that you copied and pasted. So if you go back into Phrase Express and go to edit phrases, it takes you to the one that you actually just utilized. So it's pretty cool. Phrase Express does work in Waypoint. I'll actually pull that up for you. So for instance, if this was the, I have a code for everything. So I know, like for me, it's Business 600, week 1, great, good, medium, whatever the case is. You'll develop your own codes. No one's gonna have the same codes, obviously, but it's relatively simple. It's quick. It just absolutely wipes out the repetitive typing, and it's just a masterful piece of equipment to have in your tool chest. Cole, if I have no objections, I'd like to go on to a couple of other things that you and I talked about, and it revolved around me reaching out to the students.
Yes, please. Now is the perfect opportunity for that. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Someone also asked, does this software work without Outlook emails? It works anywhere you can put a cursor. It's absolutely amazing. It's a separate tool. You'll have to go through BTS to get it installed. If there's an upgrade needed, the product, there's a free version of it. That's what I use, and it's a wonderful tool. You have to get BTS to install it the first time, but after that, it's yours. Okay. Would I like to share my database of comments? I could. Sure, send me an email. I'll send them to you, but you're still going to have to encode your own. So if you like a comment, you're going to have to give it a code. Like, say, for instance, most of my things start with 2 hashtags. For instance, I'll utilize, this is something that I use when I have a student that does not do well in terms of similarity. That is the comment that I have pre-built. Okay, and then I go in and I would pop in the actual percentage, not 825%, but 82% or whatever it is, and then put their name in. And then I can actually go ahead and put that in there. I also have it for if there was an issue and I'm not going to send them to iRoad. I'm going to kind of give them a teachable moment. I have comments for that. So yes, we can definitely, I'll work with anybody who wants to do that. We need a policy on this tool. Okay, all right, that's good. All right, so I'm going to. Okay, I'm reading some of the comments. If I missed something, please just reach out to me. My email address.
And I do just want to add in super quick, because we've had you and I had this conversation earlier this week, and when we actually did a pilot with Annotate Pro, a tool that we did not that long ago, which is similar, we had very similar conversations where people at first were like, hey, I'm not gonna leave the same comments for every student. And no, that's certainly not what we want folks to do.
Right.
It's a way to get those starters out there to where you have more time to add in those content specific things. You know, the things that you see again and again, this is what these are perfect for and for your starters, but it gives you more time to dive in like that. So that's kind of the thought
and
line.
that's why I use the term template, because every comment can probably be tailored. And what I generally do is I go through first and I take care of the students that have the scores that weren't perfect, and I handle those first. At least I did in the old gradebook. Now that we don't have the need to fill out the rubric and then go back and type the grade in, it's kind of taken that away. So Speedgrader is my #1 tool. So yes, Text Expander definitely allows you to avoid retyping the things that you use on a regular basis. And I know that when I put my template data in for a student, they may have done a great job or an okay job with something. Once I put that in, I can then go back and say, you did well, remember to tighten this up, or remember to do this, or you did an exceptional job in this particular area, thank you for your hard work. So it gives you a baseline, it gives you a template or a boilerplate. So it's kind of a cool thing. Yes, there is a free version of Phrase Express. I want to jump over to, Cole, what we talked about, how I actually, there's some other things that I respond to the students with some specialized information. And it was when I see certain things happen that key me in. And I know as instructors, we all know after the first week or two, kind of how our students write. Some of us can pick up on that after the introduction. We know who the folks that are going to excel. We know the folks that are struggling with grammar and all those things, APA format, those things come up. Other indicators that I look for, when I see a shift in the amount of posts, like say for instance, a student normally responds to 5, 6, 7, 8 people, and the next week they're short, I reach out to them. I do use Civitas, but I'll also put a post in the gradebook and I'll say, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Jackson, Ms. Smith, whatever the case is, I noticed that your posts were a little bit different this week, is all well. So I look for that, but I also look for the drops or the increases in performance. When one week someone can't string a sentence together and the next week they're writing a paper that seems like a disquisition, then I start to kind of look into those things and I may reach out to them and put in a comment there as well. Those are some of the things that I do. Like I said, I'll do them in the gradebook and then I'll do them in Civitas as well, because it CCs the advisor, plus it gives you a record in your personal inbox as well, in your faculty inbox. And one of the other things, Cole, if you don't mind me touching on, the message students who, the really cool thing about that is when I send out messages to my students, what I'll generally do is the students that scored more than, and I'll put in a 0, or say for instance 0.1, it'll give you who scored what. Then I'll put in a little note here, thank you for your work in the week 4 forum, and I put a message in. In here, I don't put the names because it comes across as a very short, quick message to the students. Hey, thank you for your work in the week 4 forums. I do that, and generally I'll get feedback from the students like, hey, thank you for recognizing my work this week. And it looks like the message went to them individually. Then I go over to the announcements and I'll put in the week 4 posts are graded, thank you for your work. You know, I generally do that on Thursday. So remember that tonight, the initial posts are due and 2 posts in each forum by Monday. That's kind of how I work it, which leads me to something else that Cole and I had talked about, is we talked about also Waypoint. When I notice something, I'll leave them a message. I noticed that, it was all well. I'll do the same in the gradebook. And then one of the other things too, now with the new format of the classroom, when you put announcements in, students are responding to those announcements. You got to go back through and check, because it's actually the classroom is letting you know that they're responding. So be sure to check those. And I know most of us are probably doing that. And then now, considering what's going on, I tend to end with stay safe, just as my kind of final greeting. An end date on the announcements. I'm not sure that I'm understanding the question in terms of end dates.
So it's not a functionality that we have right now. We can have a start date, but we don't have end dates to assignment. It's like if you post an announcement, it's up for an infinite amount of time. I think that eCollege might have had end dates, maybe. I think that some other LMSs do as well. And it's a Canvas thing for sure. Not like our specific instance. We could definitely ask Canvas about it, and potentially look in the Canvas community. That's a great place for some of those suggestions that are very Canvas specific like that.
Is that in the context of making them disappear out of the classroom? Is that it?
Yeah.
Because unless I'm mistaken, Cole, I think there's a feature we can go in and put a date and tell the announcement when to appear and when to turn off. I may be wrong, but I thought I saw that somewhere. I'll have to go back.
You can delay posting, but I don't know if you can do an end date. I would have to take another look at that.
And then I also know that you can also lock out comments as well after a certain point in time, so that folks can no longer make comments. Now, that would probably be a good tool in the sense of if someone needed to stop late posting, like if your forum closes on a specific day and you don't want any more posting, you could do that. But given the current situation, I think people are being a little bit more lenient and lax on that. The other thing is, as I mentioned, if you have a major issue, run it through Civitas so that there's a paper trail and that you can actually get the students some assistance. One of the other things that, this is just me, this is my schedule, what works for me. On Mondays, I'm grading late papers, the folks that had accommodations, any final responses in my forum. That's the day that I do that, because I know by that day, everybody should have their things in. I also have a little Excel file with all the students' names and which week it is. And you just put a little X in there so you know what week you replied to them, or what day or what forum you replied to them, so you're not always responding to the same students. So week 1, I have 12 students, and week 2, I have a different 12 students. That's one way. Tuesday, waypoint. I'm an early bird. I like to get up at 2 in the morning on Tuesday. I'm not recommending that for anyone, but I like to get my grading out of the way early. So Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm sending grades back. And then, yes, the replies to students, that's awesome. That's a great tactic. And then Wednesday, obviously finishing up grading. I'm posting on usually Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm in the forums Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Any accommodations or anything like that, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm looking for those. And Thursday, I'm actually entering grades Thursday morning so that I can get them that announcement that grades for the posts have been graded, and tonight is the night for entering initial posts. And then there's a question, does Speedgrader save your scores that you can return to it on another date? As far as I'm aware of, Cole, you may want to jump in on this, but I think once you move off of the student's grade, the grade does stay there.
I'm sorry, I lost that. What was that last part?
The question is, does Speedgrader save your score so that you can return to it on a later date? I'm 99% sure that once you put a grade in, you can come back to it. The catch is as long as you haven't posted the grades, you probably won't have a big issue. Ashley, I think once you post a grade, the student's going to see it. So whether you made a mistake or you decide to go back and change grades or continue on, once they're posted, they're visible to the students. So you just have to remember that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Phrase Express has a standard professional enterprise version. Which one is sufficient? I have the free version, Jody. I'm just using the free version, and I haven't had any issues whatsoever. It does marvelous things. You can set it up to do things in email. There's actually in your Outlook, there's there's something called Quick Parts that does something very similar. It drops templates in, but Phrase Express works everywhere, where Quick Parts only works within Outlook. So if you have something you type on a regular basis, it doesn't matter where you put your cursor. If you hit the codes, Phrase Express does it. If you go in and check out the video, it'll give you, it's maybe a 3-minute video. It'll break it down for you. It's an awesome tool. It's simple, it's powerful, it does colors. You can actually do, you can actually put in graphics if you like. So that's kind of a cool thing as well. It does do graphics. So if you have and I haven't used this one in a while. I don't know if it's still there or not. There you go. So it does graphics as well. So it's really cool. So
Oh, that
Phrase
is
Express is powerful. It's super
awesome.
cool.
Dr. Moore, I want to thank you so much for sharing this with us today. It was, this has been awesome. And like you said, like, it's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, when it comes to, these efficiencies and, we're really just tipping the iceberg today. There's so much else to do. I do have a couple other things I want to highlight just super, super quick for folks. So I realize we're running short on time, and I hate to cut off this conversation because it's so valuable. I'm hoping we can move part of it offline and keep it going. But I thank you for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right, I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not too worried that we don't have, I'll keep people for just a minute or two over, but really a lot of what I'm hoping that folks will do from here is do a little bit of homework and hop in and do a quick little test that we've set out for some folks. So Inspire for Faculty, we talked about last month, and it does a great job of summarizing all of a student's engagement in one quick heat map. And we're releasing tomorrow what's called the new analytics in Canvas, which is like kind of the under the hood of Inspire for Faculty is the way I like to say it. I'm going to do a super quick walkthrough, and then there's actually an assignment that we want you to do in part of this. So you'll notice once you access new analytics up in the top corner, there's the last refresh, which is every 24 hours, which is super, super fast. IFF was pretty quick, but this is really fast. So it's a great refresh rate. There's two main views for viewing analytics. There's weekly online activity and then course grade. The three main things it's looking at is page views, participation, and then course grade by students. So there's just a lot of different ways that you can slice and dice it. Down at the bottom, you can actually sort through how many times a student has viewed a page and participated, or you can click on the resources tab down there and also view by resource, which resources are accessed the most by students, which is really cool. It also offers, so I talked about the weekly online versus course grading views, and they offer two new message student who tools in there. One where you can go by actually like overall score range in the course, or by someone who didn't view something, or who did or didn't participate in the gradebook, much like we have in the gradebook, but we can do it all in one place here, which is great. And then if we go over to the course grading section, we have another couple different views, and this one at the very bottom is probably my favorite. It's a way to look at the last time students have participated and their last page view, and then you can click those and sort by most recent and most late. One thing I do want to mention as a caveat is don't pay attention to the on time right now. That's another thing with that waypoint late fix that we'll have resolved here in the next, hopefully week or so. But for now, the on-time calculator is a little bit off. There's a link here to some Canvas resources on new analytics, but mostly what I'm suggesting is that people get in there and get their hands dirty with it. Maybe we're all a little stir crazy, and I got the idea from a scavenger hunt we did for our kids, but what I want for people to do as a follow-up to this webinar today, which we included in the form, is just to get into your own new analytics tomorrow when we turn it on. And poke around and just complete the quick list that we said, and it'll show you most of the highlights of the main functionality. And I almost guarantee you'll do a lot more clicking through it and hopefully do a couple outreaches. Two super quick things I wanted to mention to people. We're really excited. Our partners in the curriculum team with Zovio have actually worked with us in rolling out a Microsoft form. So the curriculum feedback form, which we previously had as a PDF form, and faculty would have to download, fill out, send in, which creates a little bit of work and a little bit of pain for everybody involved. It's now a Microsoft form, which is available right in the help menu of your classroom. So we're hoping that any hesitation that would have taken before with a little bit of paperwork to get that fixed is now going to be a lot quicker and more efficient for everybody involved. So there's an email that went out about it, I believe, today, and it's just right there in the help menu anytime you need it moving forward. So we're very excited about that. Good for everybody. It's a win-win-win, I think is how they had put it, which I think is very accurate. And we just super quickly, this is the very last thing wanted to highlight. While the rest of the world is on pause, we are moving faster than ever, which is amazing. It's just a testament to how awesome all the individuals that we work with are and our students that we work for. Just so cool. So here are some events that we have coming up this week that we've actually tried to do a little bit of an email digest to send out to people to summarize all the things we have going on. Student Support Center reveal, that's a big one that's coming up this week from the Center for the First Year Experience. And then the EXP 105 updates that are coming out, there's sessions about both of those. And then there's also an Earth Day book club session that's going to be going on, kicking off Wednesday. And then lastly, Friday, we have the second colloquia, first one for College of Arts and Sciences on COVID-19. Very, very relevant to all of us working with our students and at this point in time. So I just want to thank you all again. There is a bit of a scavenger hunt when you go to record your participation. I'm just hoping, I know that hands-on is the best way to learn. So please take a little bit of time to go through that new analytics, and please give us any of your feedback. I know we had lots and lots of activity in the chat. So I think what we'll do is we'll have, try to have coaches and consultants kind of follow up with their groups as they can on specific things that we might have missed, because we crammed a lot into an hour and 3 minutes. So thank you all so much for attending, and for Dr. Moore for sharing with us a little bit of hands-on about how he makes it happen. So thank you all, and stay safe, and keep fighting the good fight and doing what we're doing. We work with, it's just so funny that to be in this situation. Our students are, we're continuing business, but we're seeing the ripple effect of our students. So the more that we can utilize tools like this to really, really stay engaged with them, the better. All of this is just so timely. So thank you all for all that you do and for being here today.